Hi, my name is Stuart Lynch, and this is the 6th video in a 7-part series on building a full weather app using WeatherKit. Now, there's no point in having a weather app if you can't add and change the cities that you want to see the weather for, and then eventually have them persisted to the phone for subsequent launches. Well, in this video, we'll start that process, and I'll show you how you can use the CoreLocation and MapKit frameworks to search for the cities that you want. And then, in the final video in this series, we'll persist them to the phone. I love getting your feedback, so tap the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video and leave a comment below. Make sure you subscribe to the video and ring that bell to get notifications of new videos. And if you want to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. If you're working along with me, you can continue on from the source code that was completed in that last video. However, if you're just jumping in here and you want to work along, you can download the completed project from that last video. Just make sure that you download that branch from video 5. I've already started a branch now for that video, and the completed source code for this video will be in that branch. Links to both branches are in the description. Just remember, you'll need a developer account, and you'll have to change the bundle ID to your own and make sure WeatherKit is enabled on both the capabilities and the App Services tab for the app identifier for My Weather. Well, currently we're using mock data during the design phase so that we can see the cities that we have and their weather in the preview. I don't want to lose that feature, so I want to create a data store that will have 2 versions. One that gets persisted when I run the app in the simulator or iPhone, but still displays the mock data while in development and displaying in the previews. In the final video of this series, we'll focus on the persistence for a simulator or a device. But in this one, we want to work with, as it is currently does with mock data in the previews. To accomplish this, we're going to create a data store. In the services folder, create a new Swift file and call it DataStore. Inside that file, create a class called DataStore and make it observable by applying the addObservable macro. And then create 2 properties. The first being a Boolean property that we'll call forPreview, and one that we'll call cities that will be an array of city that will initialize as an empty array. Now, since this is a class, we'll need an initializer for that forPreview property. So in the initializer, give forPreview a Boolean, a default value of false. And then in the body, set self.forPreview equal to the forPreview that we'll pass in when we initialize this data store. Next, create a function called loadCities. Then create an if forPreview clause, and if it's true, set the cities to the mock cities.cities array. And then create an else clause, but leave it empty. This is what we'll code in the next video to load from our persistence framework, whatever that may be. And then you can return to the initializer and call the loadCities function. This means then, by default, when we create an instance of the data store, we'll have an array of cities that we can display. Right now, by default, that array will be empty because forPreview will be false by default. However, if we add a forPreview of true when we initialize it, we'll get the mock data. And this is what we'll use in our preview macro. When we run on the device or simulator, though, it gets the default implementation, which means that until we code that else clause, there will be no cities. Well, we can create an instance of this class at the launch point in My Weather app and inject it into the environment. And this will be the default initializer. So at the top of that file, create a new private state property called store that is that instance of DataStore. And then at the window group after the location manager environment injection, do the same for store. Now, the only place we need this is in the cities list view. So we'll create an environment object here for the data store itself. Now this is going to cause the preview to crash, but we'll fix that in just a minute. In the for each loop for the cities array, we no longer want to display the fixed city.cities array. We want to display whatever we get from the store. Now, maybe if we're in the preview, it may be that mock array, but otherwise it's going to be the array that's going to be persisted. So here, when we fix the preview, we can inject an instance of the data store into the environment, but this case here is where we'll specify that for preview is true. And that's where it uses the mock data for previews. If you were to run this on your phone or in the simulator, when you tap on the cities button, it would bring up the screen without any issues. However, here in the preview, when we do that, it crashes. So what we'll need to do in the forecast view is inject that same for preview version of the data store into the environment so that it can pass it on to the next view in the preview. Great, we're all set now to go back to the cities list view and create a way for us to be able to find and add new cities. What I'm going to do is to create what looks like a search field at the top of our list of cities so that when I tap in there, it'll overlay a new search screen with the focus set on a real search field that will allow us to start searching for cities. It's a bit of an illusion, so let me show you what I mean. I'm going to create a new state Boolean property for the cities list view called isSearching, and I'm going to initialize it as false. I'm going to create a second @FocusState property called isFocused as a Boolean. And then I'm going to embed the list and its modifiers in a VStack. As the first element, we'll create an HStack. And then as the first element of that HStack, I'm going to create an image using the system name magnifying glass. And then adjacent to that, I'll create a text field with the string search, followed by 3 dots. And the text will be bound to just a constant empty string. I can set the text field style to a rounded border. And then I'll set .focused to the isFocused focus state property. And add some padding. And then I'm going to attach an on-tap gesture that's going to toggle isSearching. Since this cities list view is already being presented as a modal sheet, I'd like to use a ZStack to overlay a search view on top. So let's create that overlay search view now. In the Other Views folder, create a new SwiftUI file and call it Search Overlay. We'll be passing in the isSearching as a binding. So create a new binding here for isSearching as a Boolean value. And then fix the preview by adding a isSearching bound to a constant of true. When we search and find a city, we'll want to append it to our cities array. So we'll need to have access to the data store that's currently in the environment. So we'll also require an injection for preview version as well in the preview. So an @environment for the data source self is private bar data store, where we inject the data store for preview true into the preview. Well, this view will have a real search field, so create another state property called search text and initialize it as an empty string. I'll want to set its focus when the view appears, so create a Boolean focus state property here too called isFocused. And we'll replicate the same text field as we have in our cities list view, but bind this one to the actual search text. So we'll replace the content of the body with a VStack, and then return to the list view and copy the HStack that we have there, and then return and paste it into the VStack, making sure that we change the binding to the search text. And then outside of the H stack, we can add a spacer. We'll also, within the H stack, create a button where the action is. Within animation, it'll set is searching back to false. And for the label, we'll create an image with a system name of xmark.circle.fill. Now, since this is going to be presented as an overlay on top of the cities list view, we'll need to provide a background. So embed the V stack in a Z stack itself. And then add a color of a system background. And ignore safe areas. Well, there's one last thing that we need to do. When this view appears, we'll set is focus to true. So we'll create an onAppear block, set is focus to true, and we'll set the search field to an empty string. Back in the cities list view, I'll enclose that entire V stack in another Z stack. And then as the second element in the Z stack, I'll create a condition based on if is searching. And if we are searching, we'll present the search overlay, passing in the is searching property as a Boolean. Well, you can test this out now, and you'll find that it works really nice, except that I don't like the abruptness of the transition. So what I can do is return to the on tap gesture and wrap the is searching toggle with a with animation block. And then in order to make the transition back from the Z stack overlay adhere to the animation, we'll need to set the Z index for this view to a 1. We'll test again, and this is much smoother. We'll just have to figure out how to do a search to display a list of cities that match our search criteria. The key to this is to use a MapKit delegate function, and that's a MK local search completer delegate. So in the services folder, create another Swift file and call it SearchService. Import MapKit. And then create a class called SearchService and conform it to both NSObject and MK local search completer delegate protocols. And this will be an observable class. So we'll need to create an instance of the MK local search completer. And this completer will generate a number of choices for us that we will use those cities to create and update an array of city objects. So we'll create a cities property that's an array of city, but initialize it as an empty array. Since we haven't initialized our completer yet with anything, we'll need an initializer for the completer, that MK local search completer. So we can set self.completer to the completer that we pass in when we initialize it, and then call super init, and then specify that this file, self completer.delegate, is equal to self. When we submit our search, we want to pass in the string from there into a function here. So call the function update and the parameter label query fragment of type string. And then we can specify that the completer's result types, which is an array of different types of objects, what we want is just the address type. And the query fragment will be that passed in argument. Well, now we can create the delegate functions, which is a completer did update results. And this is where we want to map the results we receive into that array of cities using the completion that we get. Well, the completion result will give you a title, which is the name of the location, so we can use that for our city name. But it doesn't give us the coordinates that we need. Or does it? Turns out that there is a private Apple API that you can use to get the map item for that location. And you can access that using a completion value for a key. And you can specify this private key using an underscore map item as an MK map item. Now, I can't take credit for this discovery. I found this out from a blog post by Piella Abadia. And I'm sure I butchered that name, so my apologies. I'll leave a link in the description. And this is an optional object, however. And we should make sure that this does exist by using an if-let to unwrap it. Else, we'll return nil. Well, once we have this optional item, we can use it to add the map item placemark, coordinate latitude as the latitude, and the corresponding one as the longitude. And that then will map and give us an array of cities from which we can choose. And then to remove all optionals, what we'll do is we'll use a compact map instead of just a map. So back in our search overlay, we can execute the search. But first we'll need to import MapKit. So in Search Overlay, create a state property to initialize the search service where the completer is an instance of the MK local search completer. And then you can watch for changes of search text by creating an onChange modifier and pass in the search text as the argument for the search service's update function. And then this will then update the array of cities that it will find. And while we're at it here, when this preview appears, we should probably clear out any of those cities that may have been there from the previous search. So we'll just specify that the search service's cities is an empty array. Well, now that we have that array, we can display them in a list. So I'm going to replace the spacer with a list that iterates over the search service's cities array. And this will give you a city that you can use to display in the list. So create a button where the action will be to append the tapped city to the DataStore's array of cities. And then you can set is searching back to false, and that will display this presentation in the Z-stack and present us with the list view again. For the label, we'll just display a text view with the city name, and I'll apply a font of headline. Well, let's test it. I'm going to return to the forecast view now in the preview and tap on the cities list button. I can tap on the search field and search for a city. And I'm heading to Chicago, so let me check that out. I don't like the way this looks like a button, so I'm going to fix that in a second. When I tap on the city I want, the search overlay disappears, and I can see my list of cities now has Chicago too. But it's at the end of the list. I'd like it sorted alphabetically. So let's first fix that button. I'm going to return to the search overlay, and I'll apply a list style of plain to the list, and that should fix the display issue here. I can even test it out right here in the view. I get the search completions as I type. Now back to the cities list view. I want my cities to be sorted alphabetically. So I can add a sorted method to my store.cities using a key path comparator, and we'll use the key path of .name. Now my mock data was already sorted, so you won't see any difference here, but let me demonstrate that in a second. One more thing we need to do is if I add a city, I'd better be able to delete one. So I just want to do that with a swipe gesture on the list. So just before the on tap gesture, create a swipe action. And then with the swipe action, create a button with a destructive role. And the label is going to be an image with a system name of trash. Now, since the array has been sorted, we'll need to find the one from the unsorted array that was swiped on. So we'll need to match up based on that ID property. So if letIndex is equal to the store.cities first index, where the store cities ID is equal to the iterated cities ID. Now, if I find it, then we can, from the store.cities array, remove it at that index. Let's do one more test then. Back in the forecast view, I can tap on the cities list button. And I can see I can now swipe to delete one of my cities. If I tap on the search field, I can search for a city like Chicago, and again, the results are no longer in blue. And when I select it, it gets added to my list and displayed in alphabetical order. Perfect. There's only one more thing that we need to do, and this is to implement a persistence layer and perhaps add a launch screen and icon so that we'll have a fully functional weather app. The final video will be out next. So I hope you've enjoyed this series so far, and if you have, please give this video a thumbs up and leave me a comment. Be sure to subscribe to my channel so that you get notified when new videos are released. Thanks for watching.